The small beach town was buzzing with summer energy when Anna and her husband Mark decided to spend a long weekend at their vacation home. The house with its weathered shutters and sun-bleached deck was a cozy retreat that the couple cherished. Though small, a modest two-bedroom, it was perfect for the quiet, intimate getaways they both craved. The plan had been simple, a weekend away from the noise and stress of the city. But life, as Anna knew too well, rarely followed plans. On their first evening, just as they were settling in with glasses of wine on the deck, a car pulled into the driveway. Ethan, their neighbor from the city, stepped out, looking sheepish. His car had broken down on the nearby highway, and he'd remembered that Anna and Mark had mentioned being in town. Every inn and motel in the area was booked solid for the weekend, leaving him with nowhere to go. Mark, ever the hospitable one, waved off Ethan's apologies and insisted he stay with them. "We'll make it work," Mark said, clapping him on the shoulder. "The couch folds out, and it's just for a couple of nights." Later that evening, as the three of them sat around the living room, Mark frowned thoughtfully. "Ethan, I've got to warn you, the pull-out couch is brutal. It's basically a medieval torture device. You'll wake up with a broken back." Ethan laughed, brushing off the comment. "It's fine. Really." No, Mark insisted, gesturing toward Anna. "You take the guest bed. I'll just bunk in with Anna tonight." Anna's stomach tightened at the suggestion. She glanced at Mark, hoping he'd reconsider, but her husband had already made up his mind. Ethan hesitated, but Mark wouldn't hear any protests. And so, when the night wound down and the house grew quiet, Anna found herself in the guest bed. Not with Mark, but with Ethan. The bed was small, barely big enough for two adults, and the air in the room felt too warm, too heavy. She lay on her side, rigid and unmoving, her back to Ethan. Ethan, for his part, tried to keep as much distance as possible, but the confines of the bed made that nearly impossible. He could feel the heat of her body even through the thin layer of the sheets. He kept his hands awkwardly on his stomach, afraid to move too much or accidentally brush against her. But despite his efforts, the tension between them was undeniable. The room was quiet save for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the distant crash of waves outside. Anna's breathing was steady, but it sounded forced, deliberate. Ethan closed his eyes, willing himself to sleep, but his mind refused to cooperate. He was hyper-aware of Anna, of her nearness, of the faint scent of vanilla in her hair, of the way the strap of her tank top had slipped slightly down her shoulder. He hated himself for noticing. She was married. To Mark, his friend. Ethan had always respected Anna, admired her for her kindness and poise. But here in the dark, in the intimate stillness of the shared bed, his admiration felt like something else entirely. Something dangerous. Anna shifted slightly, pulling the blanket higher around her, but the movement only made things worse. Her arm accidentally brushed against his, a fleeting contact that sent an electric jolt through both of them. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's fine," Ethan replied quickly, though his voice sounded strained. His arm froze where hers had touched it, as if he were afraid to move and draw attention to the moment. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of his presence behind her. It was stifling, and yet, there was a flicker of something else. Something she didn't want to name. Ethan shifted again, trying to find a more comfortable position. But the movement brought him closer, and his shoulder brushed hers this time. The contact was fleeting but undeniable. His breath hitched and Anna's body went still. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked softly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant. Anna hesitated. The question felt heavier than it should have, loaded with unspoken meaning. "I'm fine," she said finally, her voice tight. The silence stretched again, but now it was charged, crackling with something neither of them dared acknowledge. Anna squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block it out. She loved Mark. She wouldn't betray him, not in action, not even in thought. And yet, the tension in the room made it harder to hold on to that resolve. Ethan sighed quietly. I can take the floor if this is too awkward, he murmured, though the thought of leaving the bed felt like both a relief and a loss. No, Anna said quickly, perhaps too quickly. She softened her tone. No, it's fine, really. But it wasn't fine. Not entirely. The bed felt even smaller now, every movement amplified, every breath shared. Ethan could feel the conflict radiating off her, and it mirrored his own. He turned his head slightly, his gaze lingering on the outline of her profile in the dim light. This is hard, he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Anna's breath caught. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't have to. The tension between them was palpable, and she closed her eyes, willing herself to focus on Mark, sleeping soundly in the next room. Mark, who trusted her implicitly. Mark, who had no idea what was happening in this room. I should sleep, she said abruptly, her voice firmer now. She turned her back to him again, creating what little distance the bed allowed. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding even though she couldn't see him. Yeah, me too. But neither of them slept easily. The tension lingered, hanging in the air like a storm cloud. It was a silent battle, a test of willpower against the unspoken pull that threatened to spiral out of control. By morning, the feverish intensity of the night had faded, replaced by the bright, disarming light of day. Ethan left the house not long after breakfast, his car repaired and his expression guarded. Neither he nor Anna mentioned the night, and Mark remained blissfully unaware. For Anna, the incident became a quiet reminder of the strength of her commitment to her marriage. And for Ethan, it was a lesson in boundaries and the quiet, complicated beauty of relationships that could never be.